Good morning, class. Um, Another cold day in Ohio. I think it's 10 degrees out this morning. But, anyways, um, discussion board two, dealing with my hopeful dissertation on the Jamestown colony. And I'd like to focus on all aspects of the colony. But if I have to focus it down, I'm working on the relationship between Captain John Smith's gang and the Powhatan Indians once they arrived and what actually happened there. So, a couple articles that I looked at this week were titled. The first one was Powhatan's World and Colonial Virginia, a conflict of cultures between the Eastern Shore Indians of Virginia and Maryland. And the other one was Captain John Smith, Pocahontas, and a clash of cultures, a case for the ethno-historical perspective. With that being said, I actually had to do a little research on what the term ethnohistory meant in terms of this relationship. It's kind of a new aspect of the research that historians are looking into between the relationship between the Indians and the colonists. So, ethnohistory. The definition states it is a branch of anthropology concerned with the history of peoples and cultures, which includes a wide range of current scholarship inspired by anthropological and historical approaches to the human condition around the world, with a specific emphasis on the Americas. It also analyzes and interprets evidence and experiences, organizations, and identifies of indigenous and minority peoples that otherwise elude the histories and anthropologies of nation states and colonial empires. Kind of long, but there you have it. Um, so basically, what I have found with the most recent research on the relationship between the original colonists and the Powhatan Indians is that it's not so much the colonists wanting to take over the Powhatan Indians' lands and basically enslave them, like I stated in my last discussion. But more so, what I'm finding is the Powhatan Indians were more concerned about taking over the colonists as they arrived. They seen the colonists as a new people that had new goods, basically new services, new commodities that if they took over these people, they could learn from them and learn their ways of how to, manufacture the goods that they were producing. Um, so basically, what happened was, which we all know, is the Powhatans were a huge society at this time. They were in the middle of a very powerful expansion and a powerful chiefdom, um, which this tribe increased their holdings through a mixture of intimidation. What they would do is they go into these smaller Indian tribes, kill the leaders, and then take all the survivors from that tribe and then reincorporate their leaders into that tribe. While this was going on, they were expanding. They were huge, tens of thousands of Indians throughout this area. Well, then came John Smith and his settlers and planted their colony right in the middle of this, probably the worst time, um, which basically, in today's terms, they were fresh bait for this expanding Indian culture. So basically, when the two cultures came into contact, they both began jockeying for advantages, basically to keep surviving. The Powhatan leaders would repeatedly come to John Smith um, and ask him to give up Jamestown, or else they actually gave him an ultimatum to leave the area, and they gave him another tract of land north, which is called Cape Hawasike, I believe. Um, just mainly because the Powhatans, this was their land, they weren't going to give it up. At one point, the Powhatans were pretty cocky in a sense that they tried to make John Smith and the settlers lay down their arms and their firearms and basically bow almost like a king to Chief Powhatan, almost like he was a king. Um, so that's the basic relationship, how it started, which was not good. Um, the, so basically, in conclusion, the Powhatans were not passive observers of the English um, colony, nor were they hostile in the way that they were acting in a reactive manner to the intrusion of the English. Um, More so, the natives of Eastern Virginia had their own set of priorities, their preconceptions, their plans, their motivations were all very human, which guided them in their relationships with the European colonists. So within this cultural framework, basically, they made conscious decisions about what aspects of the Indian or the colonial civilization and how much of it they would want to adopt or reject. Um, then subsequent hostilities in Virginia occurred basically due to the threat posed by the English advances would exceed the balance in the relationship with the Indians. So in the end, what I'm finding is it's not so much that the English came over to conquer the Indians. It's more so in the new recent research that the Indians actually were trying to incorporate these English colonists into their chiefdom per se, um, because they were intruding on their lands. Thank you. Have a good rest of the week.